About 10 years ago, I decided to build this bike to be a simple, single-speed urban cruiser that I would use to get around the streets of Boston. Now, since then, this bike has gone through many different iterations. It went from urban cruiser to mountain bike to now my grab-and-go bike. It's just always ready to go if I need to go to the grocery store or run out for an errand. This is the first bike I grab. Now, this bike has always been a single-speed belt drive bike, but I'm going to change that. I've decided to put a 3-speed internally geared hub on here, keeping the bike belt driven, so that I have a little bit more options with my gearing for when I ride the bike around town. I think the 3-speed hub is going to serve that very well. It's going to give me a low or launch gear. It'll give me a 1-to-1 gear ratio, which will be the same as I have it set up now. And then it'll give me an overdrive for when I'm on flat terrain. I could pedal a little slower and get the bike speed up a little faster. So throughout this video, we're gonna cover some of the pain points of the build, the finished product, and then we're gonna take it for a quick test ride to see how it performs. So I'm just starting to lace up the Sturmey Archer hub to the Stan's Crest rim. It's an asymmetric rim, so I had to look up which side the offset goes to. AKA just looked at another bike I had that also has offset rims built by a professional. Man, I swear I screw this up every time I build a wheel. So I just did the drive side, but the outside facing spokes I did over, and they're supposed to go over, under. So I have to take all these outside spokes out and then weave them underneath the inside spoke. One of these days I'll get it right. So right after I finished fixing the last spoke, I noticed that the label on the hub didn't quite line up with the valve stem like I wanted it to. Not that this is a huge deal, but it kind of annoyed me, so I took the wheel apart and decided to try again. Okay, so we're ready to start lacing our wheel up. Again, this is the second time. I'll explain the mistake I made so you don't make the same. The first spoke is supposed to go just one hole to the left of the valve stem. And if you want your wheel or your hub label to line up exactly with the valve stem like it should, you need to count 4 holes to the left of the center of the label. Now I made the mistake of not counting this hole that is exactly centered with the label as hole number 1. I started number 1 over here, and it ended up being a little bit off, which wasn't really a big deal, but it kind of drove me crazy. So I'm going to do this again where I start the key spoke, or that first spoke to the left of the valve stem, by counting hole number 1 as the hole that is exactly aligned with the center line of this. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put a spoke through there and redo this whole process over again. Nipple inside the rim. This is tedious. It's like if you've ever played an acoustic guitar and dropped the pick inside the guitar. It's not unlike that. Come on. Oh, come on. Yes. Haha, there it is. That little bugger. Okay, back to wheel building. Okay, now that I have the drive side laced, again, for like only the 3rd time, you know, 3rd time's the charm. We get it right because we do it thrice. I don't know, whatever you want to say. Made a lot of mistakes, but good news is I think we're done and I think everything's correct on this side, so we could finally flip it over to the brake side. All right, I believe we are looking at a completed, correctly laced wheel. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten up all the nipples a little bit. Okay, for the next part, we're going to bust out my homemade truing stand, aka an old fat bike fork, I guess, that I can't sell. So that's become my truing stand along with a couple zip ties. So we are going to set this wheel up as if it was going to be mounted in the rear of the bike, and we're going to dish it, meaning center the rim side to side, and then we're going to true it, getting rid of any hops and wobbles. Okay, so after giving all of the drive side spokes about 2 full turns, we're pretty close to center. This side could still probably use a little bit more of a favoring. So what we're going to do is just give all the drive side spokes another half a turn. Okay, I finally got my dish or my side-to-side measurement pretty much centered in the fork. So now I'm just going to go through and spin the wheel, and then I'm going to move this zip tie to any point where the rim makes contact with it. And then I'm just going to adjust the spokes on the opposite side to pull the rim away from the zip tie until we get a pretty decently straight wheel. It's looking pretty good. Just have one little deviation, but it's at the welded seam of the rim, so I'm not going to fuss too much over it. It's less than 1 millimeter out, so it's not really that bad. I think once you put a tire on it, it's not even going to be noticeable. So the other thing I did was I went around and I plucked all the spokes just to make sure they all have some tension on them. They don't exactly all need to be the same exact pitch, but I like to hear that they're all at least somewhat tensioned and none of them sound dead or they don't ring out when you pluck them like a guitar string. So we start at the valve stem, we just kind of lay this in, and then we just work our way all the way around the wheel. Oh boy, I might not even need to trim this. Okay, so that turned out pretty good. Tape was not too wide. In fact, I think it was just the right size once I laid it in there and pushed it into the channel in the middle of the rim. So I got that all taped up and ready to go. We're going to throw a valve stem in it and get a tire on there. Alright, that's a tight bead. Hopefully that seals up quick. Sweet. So the Sturmey Archer hub was designed for, I don't even know what kind of bike it was designed for. Typically it'd be chain driven, and in fact they did send this chain drive ring along with the hub, but I want to do a belt drive with it. So one huge difference between belts and chains, obviously besides the different sprocket, is the alignment between the rear and the front chainring and sprocket need to be just about perfect. And for some reason, the way the Sturmey Archer hub is set up, if you put the sprocket on the normal place and you don't do anything different, the belt alignment is out by like 5 millimeters, which is huge, not acceptable. So what I did was I spaced the front part of the drive in toward the bike as much as I possibly could by just taking a few of the spacers I had on the bottom bracket and moving them to the other side. Not a huge deal. It does shift the crank set over a little bit, but it's only about maybe 3 millimeters total difference, so that's not a big deal. But on the hub side, I had to get a little creative. So the hub has space onto which the sprocket could slide, but they put a groove in it with a snap ring to keep the sprocket from walking off. And so in order to put the sprocket on, it really has no wiggle room side to side. So what I had to do was I'm going to 3D print this spacer. So this will go on first where the sprocket would normally go. Then the spring clip will go on, this ring that holds that in place. And then this will go on the outside and bolt to this retention ring. Now I ordered one of these made out of aluminum. It's not going to be here for a few weeks, but the plastic one actually does the job. So temporarily I'm just going to use the plastic one just to try it out and get everything set up on the bike. In case anyone else runs into the same issue, I will put a link to the Onshape model for this adapter, and you could order it from PCBWay for about $40. And then you could have your belt drive sprocket aligned pretty much perfectly with the front chain ring, or it at least gives you a little bit of wiggle room so you can move it toward the outside of the bike. So here's a close-up of the Sturmey Archer drive side of the hub, so you can kind of see what's going on. And there's a groove in the middle of this, so you really don't have anything but 3 millimeters to get the sprocket on there, and it's not really supposed to move side to side at all. So here's what it looks like with the adapter or the sprocket retention ring in place and the circlip holding that in place. And then the sprocket again will go on the outside and bolt to that. So you cannot pull this off. It's going to be pulled up against this circlip and it won't be able to be pulled off of the hub. Okay, and finally this is what it's going to look like. You can see the sprocket is bolted onto that retaining ring and the circlip is installed. So even though this is sitting on the very edge of the surface for the shaft, it cannot be pulled off. The retention ring is holding it on there nice and tight. And this is only a 3D printed version, which surprisingly I was able to tap with threads and it holds it on there pretty well, but the aluminum version is going to be even better. So that'll be coming in a couple weeks, but I think... Forgot about that. But I think this one will be good enough just to do a test ride. So here I have the old single speed wheel. We're going to weigh that, and that one comes in at right around 1900 grams. And then we have our 3-speed hub and wheel assembly, and that one is coming in at call it 2800 grams. So will the kilogram of added weight be worth having 3 gears? I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe. Now, unfortunately, this shifter is really only intended to be mounted one way. You can see that there's like these little U-shaped teeth that are machined out of the shifter base, but they're only done on one side of it, which means you have to mount this on top of the handlebar like this. So if you can imagine, like your brake lever would be here and then your shifter would be up here, which I really don't want. I don't want all kinds of stuff sticking up on top of the handlebars, even though I already have all this other junk like bells and lights and stuff. But what I thought would be a much better way to do this was to hang this down and flip this like this so that I could put it inside the brake lever so I have my handlebar here, and this would be the shifting mechanism that way. And then that way it's sort of underneath and hidden behind the handlebar. But to do that, I'm gonna have to cut 3 more or 4 more grooves in the top here to match this bottom pattern so that I could rotate this, because this won't go in only but one way. Okay, so I took the Dremel and I knocked out 3 little dents so that these 3 teeth can fit in there, and just marked the bottom side of this with a paint marker, put it about where I want it, tapped it in place, and it showed me kind of where they were. And then I just took this tiny little engraving tip and just sort of worked them in there until this would fall in there and sit nice and flush and kind of just snap into place and not go anywhere. So, all right, so here's a quick overview of the installed shifter and the cable routing. So this is a 3-speed indexed shifter, actually from Sturmey Archer. So this is in the low gear, that's 1-to-1, and all the way down is overdrive. It's a little bit of a reach to get all the way down there, but not too bad. Routed the cable out and around to the other side of the bike following the brake line, and then reusing the exposed cable routing lugs that the bike was designed with. A little piece here just to jump right at this, and then another bit of exposed cable. And then this is a little wonky. It takes kind of a tight S-turn to get from this last lug down to the input for the hub shifter. I mean, it shifts just fine, but it does look like it's a little wonky, as this normally would come out here to a regular standard derailleur, but I don't really see any issues with this. Hopefully it doesn't give me issues over time. And this is our hub shifter. I'm gonna move the shift lever. You can kind of see what that does. So that's overdrive, that's 1-to-1, that's first gear for launch. And then I routed the cable through this little hole because I'm not using it for anything, and then that will kind of guarantee that the end of the cable won't get sucked up into the belt, because it was getting really close to the belt before I ran it through the hole. First thing I notice I love is having the low gear to launch. So I just had to pull out in front of a truck, and having the low gear there to be able to launch quickly was really nice. And right now I'm kind of cruising along, so I'm going to shift into the higher gear. And it's nice not to have to be spun out to maintain road speed. It's pretty cool. So right now I'm just kind of cranking at a comfortable cadence, and I got about 30 kilometers an hour, 27, 28. So one thing I noticed is this hub constantly makes a clicking sound all the time when you're pedaling. So normally, like, you hear the clicking of the freewheel when you stop pedaling, which is totally normal. But when you're pedaling, it's constantly making a like a lower volume, but it's still clicking. I mean, I guess that's normal, but I don't know, that might be annoying to some people. So I notice when you shift from high gear back to 1-to-1 and you're under a load, say going up a hill, you do have to let off a little bit of pressure before it'll actually make the shift, which isn't surprising. I mean, that's pretty much the same way you treat a normal drivetrain, but just something to be aware of. You really can't shift it under power, or under a lot of power anyway. All right, coming up to a stop sign, so I'm going to downshift into my easy gear so I could launch. Oh yeah, that's nice. We're gonna shift 1-to-1, and we're gonna shift overdrive, 3rd gear. Very nice. Really smooth shifting up from the starting gear to 1-to-1 to overdrive. No problems there. Even under a little bit of load, it's pretty smooth. Now, I'm not really sure about what the efficiency is. I mean, judging by feeling, feels fine. I mean, I am working a little harder because I'm pushing a harder gear and I'm going faster than I typically would be going at this cadence. So it's hard to tell how inefficient the hub is compared to the single speed. But I do have a million laps of this same route with the bike set up as a single speed in the same configuration. So what I'll do is I'll compare that data to the 3-speed data and see if having the overdrive improves my time, my overall like average speed. And then I'll also be looking at the heart rate data to see if I'm working harder on average to go that faster speed. I mean, I guess I'll have to find a way to normalize that, because if I'm going faster, it should take a little more power, but we'll figure that out. That's what math is for. We're gonna test out our 1st gear and see how this feels on the trail. Oh, right away, that's awesome. Way better than even the single speed 1-to-1. It's just nice having that extra little bit of push. Yeah, bust through all those ferns. Do I notice the weight? Not really. I mean, this bike with the panniers and the rack on the rear was kind of rear heavy to begin with, so I guess throwing, well, where does the trail go? I don't even know. I guess throwing an extra kilogram back there didn't really make it too noticeably different, but I would say that having the crawler gear for the trail is well worth the extra little bit of weight. Was it worth 300 bucks? I don't know, but it was a fun project. All right, back on the trail, and we're gonna shift 1-to-1, pick up a little bit of speed, and we're gonna go into overdrive. There we go, and we're cruising, man. So one thing I did just notice is that there's quite a bit of a lag in engagement when you're in overdrive, it seems specifically. I didn't really feel it as much in 1-to-1 or the starting gear, but when you're in overdrive, if you stop pedaling and then you go to start applying power again, you almost feel like 2 stages of engagement before you actually put power in the wheels. So it's a little weird, but not the end of the world. All right, we're gonna see how it does with a little bit of load. Get some weight back here now. Okay, giddy up. All right, it's nice having that launch gear. Yeah, so far, really like having the 3 speeds. Super useful. I don't think I need any more than 3, but 2 big complaints, and this may be intrinsic to the Sturmey Archer internally geared hub, but engagement. I just went to go hop up a curb back there, and I went to go put some power down to lift the front wheel up, and it wasn't there where I expected it to be. You know, if I was riding any regular rear hub, it would have been there and I would have been able to lift that wheel up, but kind of plowed into the curb because it took an extra few degrees of revolution before the pawls engaged back there. So that's complaint number 1. I'd say complaint number 2 is definitely just the noise it makes. It's constantly clicking all the time, except for maybe if you're in the easiest gear, the starting gear, it's not making any clicking sounds when you're paddling, only when you're freewheeling. But as soon as you shift to 1-to-1, it's making clicking sounds. And when you go to overdrive, it does like a double click. You hear like another set of pawls engage and start clicking. So you probably eventually just tune it out, but I did not expect that. I thought the hub was going to be completely silent, and my bike is a belt drive, so it's normally pretty nice and quiet. So having all that extra noise back there, it's kind of a turnoff. So I don't know if the higher end, slightly higher end Shimano hubs do that, or the Rollhoff, you know, if you want to dump $1,000 or more on a hub. For a $99 hub, Sturmey Archer, it's not too bad, other than those 2 complaints. And again, if you're using it on a commuter rig, I don't even know if those 2 things will bother you. All right, we're back home. So in conclusion, I think the Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub will do just fine on an everyday bike or a commuter bike. Given its shortcomings of it's constantly making noise and it's a little slow to engage, I would keep this off of mountain bikes or touring bikes. I also don't really know how this thing holds up over time. This could blow up on you after a few hundred miles, and it's probably going to be pretty hard to find replacement parts or repair this in the field. On a bike like this, I didn't really mind the weight, but if you're going to put this on a mountain bike where the weight becomes more critical, then you'll probably notice it and probably won't like it as much. I've only been riding this for a few days now, and I've already noticed that my average speeds have increased, but also my average power output increased due to the higher gearing. So probably kind of a wash. I'm not really saving a lot of energy, but I'm getting where I'm going a little faster, and the cadence is able to be kept a little lower. So comfort-wise, I think all that's kind of a win, sort of worth all the other trade-offs. Installation was not the easiest. As you saw, I had to design and order my own machined part to adapt this to be able to install it with a belt drive. If you're installing it on a different style frame, or maybe if you're just using a chain drive, you won't have to go through all that, but to install it with the belt drive was pretty difficult. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me struggle through this build, but I'm really satisfied with the final product, and hopefully this will inspire you to take a look at a Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub or some other internally geared hub of your choice. Have fun.